have you spent defending your worth to people who never saw it? How many times have you lowered your voice, your needs, your boundaries, just to keep the peace with those who only bring conflict? There is a price to such peace, and the cost is always you. Today, we walk a different path, a quieter path, one rooted not in reaction, but reflection, not in proving anything, but protecting everything sacred within. This talk is not about fighting fire with fire. It is about learning how to become untouchable, not by force, but by mastery. Welcome to Self-Mastery, your space for real wisdom and inner growth. Subscribe and remember our name, Self-Mastery, because others may copy the voice, but the truth lives here. Let us begin. There is a moment in every human interaction where you are given a choice, not by the other person, but by life itself. That moment happens not after someone says something harmful or dismissive. It happens in the silence right before your reaction. A fraction of a second that can change the outcome of everything. That sliver of stillness is where awareness lives. And that awareness, if cultivated, becomes your greatest protection against toxic people. To deal with difficult individuals, most people believe they must fight or flee. They think the answer is either confrontation or avoidance. But both of these are responses that arise after your emotions have been triggered. And by the time your emotions are in control, your power has already been handed over. What many fail to realize is that the real strength lies before the response. In observation, in awareness. When you're aware, you don't just see what the other person is doing. You begin to recognize how your own mind is being pulled. Neuroscience calls this the activation of the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of the brain. When this region is active, your brain moves out of survival mode and into clarity. And in clarity, everything becomes visible: the manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the projection, and most importantly, your patterns. Most of us are not hurt by others because we don't see their toxicity. We're hurt because we react unconsciously to it. If someone criticizes us, we feel the need to defend. If they ignore us, we feel the urge to chase. If they manipulate us, we try to explain ourselves, hoping they'll see our heart. But what if you stop trying to be understood by people who only want to confuse you? What if instead you just observed? Imagine you're standing in a storm. The wind is howling, the trees are shaking, the world around you feels like chaos. Now, imagine you take one step back, and suddenly you're inside a glass room. The storm is still happening, but it's no longer happening to you. That is awareness. The storm may be emotional, verbal, or energetic, but when you're anchored in your inner clarity, you are no longer at its mercy. In one story from the East, a young monk approached his master and said, "I cannot be at peace. People criticize me. Some are angry without reason. I try to be kind, but I feel hurt." The master handed him a cup of water and asked him to stir it with a stick. The water turned murky. "No, set the cup down," the master said. Minutes passed. The dirt settled and the water became clear again. "This is your mind," he said. "When it is stirred by others, it becomes unclear. But when you remain still, the truth settles." Stillness doesn't mean silence. Stillness is a mental discipline. It's the ability to stay centered when the world around you wants to pull you off balance. The deeper your awareness, the less easily you are manipulated. People who seek to control others rely on your emotional blindness. They rely on your automatic reactions. But once you become a witness of your own inner world, they lose access to your buttons. This kind of internal observation doesn't come naturally. It must be trained. Breath is the first anchor. When confronted with toxic energy, pause. Bring awareness to your breath. Just 3 slow inhales and exhales can calm the nervous system enough to delay your reaction. This activates what psychology calls the vagal brake, slowing down the stress response. And from this calm, you can choose, not react. Think of the difference this could make in your relationships. When someone uses passive, aggressive comments to test your boundaries, instead of taking the bait, you observe. You begin to see the insecurity beneath the jab. When someone withholds affection to punish you, instead of collapsing into self-doubt, you center yourself. You understand that their behavior is a reflection of their wounds, not your worth. Awareness gives you a space, and in that space, you reclaim your dignity. This principle applies not only in romantic relationships, but also with family, co-workers, even strangers. You are not required to emotionally participate in every interaction. Just because someone throws you an emotional rope doesn't mean you have to grab it. Let it fall. Let them wrestle with their own mind. Your job is not to enter their chaos. Your job is to master your own. But this is not where it ends. For even as you become more aware, another truth emerges. Not all harm comes from words or actions. Some of it comes from invisible energy, the sighs, the glances, the subtle withdrawal of warmth, the underlying hostility hidden beneath politeness. These forces may not speak, but they pull, and if you're not careful, they slowly drain you, until one day you wake up exhausted and unsure why. Energy is contagious. This is not just a spiritual concept. It is biological. Through mirror neurons, your brain is constantly tuning itself to the emotional states of others. When you're around someone anxious, your own nervous system becomes tense. When you're around someone bitter, your mind begins to anticipate conflict. You don't just interact with people, you absorb them. This is why protecting your energy is not a selfish act. It is a survival strategy. People often believe they can help toxic individuals by being patient, kind, and understanding. But if helping others requires you to become sick, depleted, and emotionally compromised, then that is not help. That is self-abandonment dressed in virtue. There's a tale of a wise woman who carried a bowl of clear water wherever she went. When asked why, she said, "Because my mind is like this water. Every person I meet either adds clarity or mud. I cannot stop people from dropping stones in my bowl, but I can decide who I carry it near." What if you treated your energy with that same reverence? What if you became selective, not in judgment, but in self-respect? You don't have to label people as good or bad, but you must learn to discern. Is this person restoring me or draining me? Do I feel more whole in their presence or more confused? Do I expand around them or shrink? These are not small questions. These are the gateways to wisdom. Sometimes toxic people don't scream. They whisper. They smile while they sabotage. They touch you with words that feel kind but leave you doubting yourself. And if you haven't built emotional filters, their energy will enter like smoke, quiet, invisible, suffocating. To build those filters, begin with daily rituals, stillness, breath work, time in nature, journaling, conversations with people who uplift. These are not luxuries, they are shields. They recalibrate your internal compass so that when dissonance enters your space, you feel it instantly. Psychology calls this emotional attunement, the ability to detect incongruence. When someone's words say, "I love you," but their tone says, "I resent you," the attuned person notices. When someone claims to support you, but subtly sabotages your progress, the attuned person pauses. You cannot develop this sensitivity without protecting your own energy field. And once you do, you begin to see clearly, not just others, but yourself. You'll begin to recognize that many of your past relationships were not based on love, but energetic patterns. Perhaps you tolerated chaos because it matched the emotional climate of your childhood. Perhaps you stayed in friendships because conflict felt familiar. Perhaps Perhaps you overgave because your nervous system equated love with proving your worth. Once you become aware of your energy, you begin to rewrite the script. You don't have to fix others. You don't have to carry them. You only have to keep your light strong enough that you stop attracting what feeds on your dimness. This is not an invitation to judge those who struggle. Everyone has wounds, but not everyone is willing to heal. And until they are, your presence becomes a feeding ground. You must ask, is my compassion creating healing or enabling harm? People often fear that setting energetic boundaries will make them cold or selfish. But the opposite is true. When you protect your energy, you become more loving, not less. Because now your love is not a desperate cry for validation. It is a conscious offering, given freely, without depletion. You are no longer loving to survive. You are loving because you have overflow. This is the shift from reaction to awareness, from exhaustion to discernment, from survival to sovereignty. And once this shift begins, your entire world starts to transform. You no longer chase after people's approval. You no longer beg to be chosen. You no longer perform to keep peace. You simply show up, aware, calm, radiant. And in doing so, you change the rules of every relationship you enter, because people sense that they cannot manipulate a person who sees clearly. They cannot drain someone who is energetically anchored. They cannot harm a soul who no longer allows entry to the storm. There is a certain kind of silence that is more powerful than any spoken word. It's the silence of a person who refuses to be drawn into battles that do not belong to them. A person who recognizes that just because someone provokes you, it doesn't mean you are obligated to participate. When faced with toxic behavior, the most intelligent response is often not a reaction at all. It is withdrawal with dignity. Many people fall into the trap of trying to win arguments with those who thrive on conflict. They feel that if they just explain themselves better, if they just speak a little louder or a little longer, the other person will finally understand. But this belief is built on a false foundation. It assumes the other person wants to understand. It assumes they are willing to engage in a genuine exchange. Often, this is not the case. Toxic individuals rarely seek clarity, they seek control. And control is maintained not through truth, but through confusion. One moment they praise you, the next they undermine you. One day they're affectionate, the next they're cold. This unpredictable behavior isn't random, it's intentional. It keeps you off balance. It makes you question yourself. And in that confusion, you become easier to manipulate. But the moment you stop participating in the confusion, everything changes. There's a parable about a warrior who challenged a Zen master to a duel. The warrior was known for his aggression and taunts, always provoking his opponents into a rage so that he could easily defeat them. But the master remained still quiet. No matter how much the warrior insulted him, the master said nothing. Eventually, the warrior left, exhausted and defeated, though no battle had taken place. Later, the students asked, "Why did you not fight?" The master replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" This is the essence of stepping out of the battlefield. The toxic person may offer you their chaos, their insults, their manipulation. But you are under no obligation to receive it. When you do not accept the bait, they are left with their own energy. And without your reaction to feed it, that energy dies. This approach is not passivity. It is mastery. It takes far more strength to walk away in silence than to speak in anger. It takes more wisdom to disengage than to argue. And it takes great inner clarity to know which battles are worth your breath. In relationships, this principle can be life-changing. Consider the dynamics where a partner constantly provokes you through criticism, sarcasm, or emotional withdrawal. If every time they bait you into defending yourself, justifying your value, or proving your love, they are subtly training you to chase their approval. But when you remain calm, centered, and refuse to argue, the game ends. You are no longer a player. You have become the observer. And this shift in dynamic does not go unnoticed. Toxic individuals feel the loss of control when you no longer respond the way they expect. At first, they may escalate, trying harder to provoke a reaction. But if your stillness holds, they are forced to face their own behavior. Whether they rise to meet your energy or walk away, your path remains clear. You are not here to fix or fight anyone. You are here to protect your peace. In the realm of psychology, this principle is mirrored in what's known as the gray rock method. It involves becoming uninteresting, emotionally non-reactive, and disengaged when dealing with manipulative or narcissistic personalities. The concept is simple. When you become boring to someone who feeds on drama, they lose interest. You starve the dysfunction of its fuel, your attention. There was once a woman who said, "I realized I was addicted to proving my worth to people who didn't value me. So I stopped talking, not because I had nothing to say, but because my silence finally said everything." This silence, born from self-respect, is not the absence of communication, it's the presence of wisdom. You begin to understand that not every accusation requires a defense. Not every insult deserves a rebuttal. Not every invitation to chaos must be accepted. You choose your battles, and more importantly, you learn that many of them are not yours at all. But while stepping out of conflict is vital, it cannot exist without its necessary counterpart, the creation of clear boundaries. People often think boundaries are walls, that they separate, isolate, or punish. But true boundaries are not built from fear. They are drawn from clarity. They are not about keeping people out, but about keeping your integrity intact. A boundary is simply an invisible line that defines what is acceptable in your life and what is not. It communicates your values, your self-respect, and your emotional limits without needing to raise your voice. It is one of the purest forms of self-care and one of the most misunderstood. Many were never taught how to set boundaries, especially in relationships. We were conditioned to believe that love means self-sacrifice, that being nice means being agreeable, and that keeping the peace is more important than speaking the truth. But what this creates is not peace, it is silent suffering. Resentment, burnout, and emotional exhaustion all begin where boundaries are absent. You cannot expect others to respect limits you have not clearly set. Ambiguity breeds exploitation. If you constantly give in, remain silent, or accommodate, you are training others to believe that you are endlessly available, even when you are not. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the foundation of sustainable love. In fact, a relationship without boundaries is like a house without walls. Everything comes in. The rain, the noise, the dust, the cold. You cannot rest in such a place. And the soul, much like the body, cannot thrive without shelter. There is a profound quote that says, "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and still love myself." In those words lies the deepest truth. Boundaries are not designed to separate you from others. They are designed to prevent you from losing yourself in others. Take the example of a man who kept tolerating his partner's emotional outbursts. He believed that being patient was the noble thing to do. But over time, he noticed something was changing. His spirit became dull. He stopped speaking his truth. He walked on eggshells, constantly trying to prevent another explosion. His kindness, once vibrant, had become fear in disguise. One day, in quiet reflection, he asked himself, "Is this relationship asking me to shrink or expand? Am I sacrificing peace to avoid conflict?" The answer led him to draw his first boundary, not in anger, but in clarity. He didn't threaten, he didn't beg. He simply said, "This is not healthy for me. I am here if we can speak with respect. If not, I will choose distance." It was not a punishment. It was self-respect in action. Boundaries don't need to be loud to be effective. They don't need to be emotional to be powerful. The most respected boundaries are the ones that are calmly, clearly, and consistently enforced. When you say no, and your energy matches your words, people feel it. They may not like it, but they will recognize it. And what happens when someone violates your boundary? Then you follow through with the consequence you've already decided. Not to hurt them, but to honor yourself. If you say, "I will not continue this conversation if you raise your voice," and the voice rises, you calmly step away, not to punish, but to protect. This level of clarity changes everything in your relationships. People begin to understand that your kindness has limits, that you are loving, but not at the expense of your well-being, that you are generous, but not endlessly available, that your heart is open, but guarded by wisdom. And perhaps the most beautiful part of setting boundaries is this: the people who are meant for you will not be threatened by them. They will not walk away. They will step up. Boundaries weed out those who seek to take and elevate those who seek to build. When combined, stepping away from conflict and setting boundaries form a spiritual armor. One protects you from external drama, the other protects your internal balance. One says, "I will not fight you." The other says, "I will not lose myself for you." Together, they form the path to quiet strength. There will always be people who test your limits, some unconsciously, others intentionally. But it is not your job to fix them. It is not your task to make them see your worth. Your only responsibility is to stay aligned with the truth of who you are and to act in ways that honor that truth. And when someone tries to pull you into their chaos, you will recognize the moment, the same moment we spoke of before. That silent space before reaction, and you will pause. And in that pause, you will either step away or speak your boundary, not from fear, not from anger, but from deep, unwavering self-respect. And that is where your power will rise, not in how loudly you speak, but in how clearly you know yourself. There is a quiet truth that often escapes the hurried mind. What you tolerate consistently becomes the architecture of your life. Not in theory, but in practice. Every repeated choice you make, every excuse you give to justify someone else's behavior, every silent moment you endure something that violates your peace. These are not just moments, they are instructions, and the people around you are listening carefully. Tolerance is noble when it stems from compassion, but tolerance becomes dangerous when it turns into self-abandonment. The nervous system, over time, learns what is normal not through your conscious beliefs, but through your lived experience. If you repeatedly remain in relationships that are rooted in chaos, your body will begin to believe that chaos is safety. If you stay in environments where respect is inconsistent and love is used as a tool for manipulation, your mind will adapt to the emotional roller coaster and start to crave its highs and tolerate its lows. And this is how dysfunction becomes familiar and familiarity becomes comfort. Not because it is good, but because it is known. There was once a woman who said, "I didn't realize I was becoming smaller every day until one morning I woke up and didn't recognize the sound of my own voice." Her partner hadn't struck her, hadn't screamed, hadn't even left. But he had slowly chipped away at her dignity through subtle control, veiled criticism, and emotional distance. And she had tolerated it, not because she was weak, but because she was conditioned to think that being understanding was her strength. But understanding without discernment is a blade that cuts inward. You become what you tolerate, not all at once, but little by little, like water eroding stone. The things you allow in your relationships shape your emotional boundaries, your sense of self-worth, and even your ability to dream. People often believe that as long as they're strong enough to endure pain, they are in control. But endurance is not the same as freedom. True power is not proven by how much suffering you can survive, but by how quickly you can walk away from what dishonors your soul. When you begin to accept things that go against your core values, you start to doubt whether your values really matter. And eventually, your spirit goes quiet. You stop asserting yourself. You stop dreaming. You stop believing that joy is your right. This is not life. It is survival dressed in loyalty. You can love someone and still be damaged by them. You can see the good in a person and still suffer from the parts of them they refuse to heal. Emotional maturity does not mean staying where you are harmed. It means acknowledging that you cannot change others by tolerating their worst behavior. In one small village, a gardener grew the most beautiful flowers, but his garden began to suffer from weeds that spread rapidly. Instead of removing them, he said, "They're just small. They won't do much harm." Days turned into weeks. The weeds spread. The flowers withered. And eventually, the garden lost its beauty. Not because the weeds were stronger, but because he tolerated them too long. In relationships, emotional weeds grow in the same way. A little dishonesty, a little disrespect, a little control. You say, "It's not that bad." And yet, over time, these small allowances become patterns. And patterns become identity. If you want to reclaim yourself, you must stop romanticizing endurance and start honoring your non-negotiables. One of the greatest myths people believe is that walking away is failure. That setting a limit is rejection. That saying no more means you never loved deeply enough. But the truth is, walking away when necessary is one of the highest forms of love, not for the other person, but for yourself. You teach people how to treat you by what you continue to accept. When you no longer accept chaos, you stop attracting it. When you no longer fear solitude, you stop settling for emotional crumbs. And when you no longer abandon your own needs to meet someone else's, you begin to live with integrity. The self-respect you display in private, when no one is watching, is the foundation of the peace you feel in public. You don't have to announce your worth to anyone. You only have to stop giving discounts to those who cannot afford your value. But this journey of reclaiming yourself must be taken with care, for there is a hidden danger on the path of healing, one that is rarely spoken about. It is the temptation to harden your heart, to protect yourself so fiercely that you build walls instead of wisdom. And though the pain that made you do so is valid, the consequence is often loneliness, isolation, and emotional numbness. There is a saying, the armor you wear to protect yourself from pain also keeps out love. To be hurt by others is part of being human, but to heal by becoming like them is a tragedy. When someone betrays you, your mind may tell you, never trust again. When someone manipulates you, your heart may whisper, don't love again. But if you listen only to those voices, you'll find yourself surviving in silence, not living in fullness. The goal is not to become cold, but clear, not closed, but conscious. You do not have to become hard to be safe. You need only to become aware. Protect your space, but keep your heart tender. Set firm boundaries, but allow yourself to feel. Use your mind to navigate relationships, but let your soul remain open to connection. In ancient wisdom, water is seen as the highest good. It is soft, yet strong. It bends, yet carves through stone. It flows around obstacles, yet wears them down over time. It nourishes all things, yet asks for nothing in return. To heal without hardening is to become like water, resilient, fluid, and life-giving. You can forgive without forgetting. You can release someone without resenting them, and you can protect yourself without losing the essence of who you are. True healing is not about proving you're unaffected. It's about becoming so deeply connected to yourself that you no longer need others to validate your pain. There was a young boy who watched his grandfather carve wood every morning. The man worked with patience and grace, smoothing the surface of each piece until it became art. One day, the boy asked, "Why don't you use power tools? They're faster." The grandfather smiled and said, "Because rushing would damage the wood. Some things must be done slowly, with care, so they keep their soul. Healing is like that, slow, gentle, with intention. And the soul of your healing journey lies not in becoming tougher, but in remaining tender, even after being hurt. In relationships, this becomes your greatest strength. Because while many people armor themselves to avoid pain, few have the courage to remain emotionally present after pain. When you do, you become a mirror. You reflect a depth that cannot be faked. And the people who are ready for love, not control, not drama, not projection, will feel that reflection and rise to meet it. To stay open in a world that often demands you shut down is not weakness. It is mastery. And that mastery begins with a simple yet profound decision. I will not become what hurt me. Every time you choose patience over pettiness, stillness over screaming, truth over manipulation, softness over hardness, you are not just healing yourself, you are breaking generational patterns. You are saying, the pain stops with me. The bitterness ends here. The love I give myself is greater than the wounds others have given me. This doesn't mean you let everyone in. It means you choose wisely. You choose to surround yourself with those who respect your energy, value your boundaries, and match your depth. And when you encounter those who don't, you walk away, not in bitterness, but in peace. Because when you have healed without hardening, your peace becomes immovable. Not because the world stopped trying to shake you, but because you are no longer looking outside yourself for stability. You become the anchor, the calm in the storm, the clarity in the chaos. And it is from this place, not reaction, not fear, not control, but from this deep, quiet power that you begin to live not as a wounded version of yourself, but as the truest version, whole, awake, and unshakable. In the end, the smartest way to deal with toxic people is not about learning how to change them, fix them, or fight them. It is about learning how to return to yourself. The most powerful protection is not retaliation, it is presence. A presence so rooted in self-awareness that no manipulation can shake it, so grounded in inner peace that no chaos can pull it off balance. When you begin to understand that not every situation deserves your attention, not every insult deserves a response, and not every person deserves a seat at your table, you begin to walk differently, quieter, stronger, lighter. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth. You no longer argue to be heard by those committed to misunderstanding you. You simply observe, discern, and move in alignment with what honors your values and protects your peace. This is the kind of clarity that cannot be faked. It is cultivated through discipline, silence, and courage. The discipline to pause, the silence to reflect, and the courage to choose yourself, especially when it's hard. In that space, toxic people lose their power over you. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You've chosen growth over chaos, integrity over ego, and wisdom over war. There is no smarter way than this.